Okay, apologies, that's so technical glitch. I wasn't recording it, but we are now. So ALC Enable, just a quick intro to what we do. We advise executive search firms and recruitment firms, but we're focused on the executive search market, actually retained executive search market, but we also help hybrids with enhancing their executive search offering. And one of our clients is here today as a panelist. That's Elliot Sanderson. And then the other panelists are Gray Hollett, who's my business partner, who was at Boyden. He was the global CMO of Boyden and head of strategy for them for 6 or 7 years, and has also advised and helped search firms of various sizes in terms of their strategy and growth. Elliot, just sort of flipping back to him, runs a hybrid firm which has transitioned from being 100% contingency, which is on the way, exactly halfway in terms of kind of split 50-50 split revenue between retained and contingency currently, and is on a clear trajectory to becoming 100% retained probably in the next 18 months. And then Alex Cheshire is the other panelist, who runs a search-to-search firm which services the contingency market and the search market. So she works both on a retained basis, hiring people for those. So that's the sort of quick intros. And just to say that there is an opportunity to ask questions in the chat, which we'll try and get to all your questions for the panelists, and I will also be asking some questions of them. So hopefully it'll be an interesting conversation, and we'll try to be doing some more of these. We were talking before we started today, and I think there's lots to cover here, so we'll cover as much as we can to help you. There'll be an opportunity for you to email myself or any of the other panelists if you've got any additional questions that we don't cover today, and hopefully we can answer all of your questions. If we can't answer any of your questions, then we'll try and find the answers and come back to you. But I think just very quickly before I sort of ask my initial questions to the panelists, I think just thought it'd be useful to explain why we're doing this in the first place. And I think that's because it's such an interesting world out there in terms of what's happening in the recruitment industry more widely and the executive search industry. And executive search firms, which I know more about than contingency firms, are becoming much more flexible with the way they work. Flexibility with their retained offering in terms of structure of the fee. I think the two worlds are merging fundamentally to some degree. And I think therefore there's also more of an opportunity for contingency firms to add retained offerings or to become retained. And there is more of a demand from corporates to have, in some cases, more of a holistic offering. I am saying in some cases it's not always the case. I think there will always be pure retained executive search firms and contingency firms too, but I'm just saying I think there's more of an opportunity to have those two offerings. So great. So I thought I'd kick off by asking Alex. So Alex again has been hiring I think it's search people and recruitment individuals at all levels, particularly at a senior level, predominantly in the UK, but also overseas for quite a number of years. How long is it, Alex?
Well, I've been in recruitment for about 22 years, but I've been doing rec to rec, I suppose, as you would call it, for about 17, and I moved to a fully retained model about 5 years ago. Yeah,
and I know you've dealt with quite a mix of clients, not only in terms of sectors, but also in terms of kind of how retained focused they are. from
Yeah.
pure contingency to pure retained. But I think you've also dealt with firms that have been transitioning towards becoming more retained, whilst you've been dealing with them or at other times. I mean, what have you seen? I'm kind of interested in what you've seen in terms of your clients or firms that you know getting this transition right in terms of moving towards more of a retained model.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of businesses that are keen to move towards a more of a retained model. And there are some businesses that are confident enough to move 100% to a retained model. And of course, there are those search businesses that have always been 100% retained. And I guess my clients are more that hybrid model that are moving into retained, or have started up as retained because they've come from a contingency model. So it's kind of been a bit of an evolutionary thing for them. And you can see why a lot of businesses want to move to retained work. But I think there's a lot of questions that businesses need to ask themselves and ask of their staff before they do that and fully embrace it. And I'm sure some of those points will be brought up. And there are some companies out there that are doing it really, really well, and there are some businesses out there that are not doing quite so great because they're kind of being led to going into the retained model, but perhaps don't have the backup for it. But they're not necessarily clients of mine, but that's overseas, or they're not clients of mine. But the kind of the competitiveness of the market at the moment seems to be, let's all move into a retained model. And there are some businesses that are doing really, really well, and there are some businesses that are failing flatly.
Why do you think they're failing, and why are others succeeding, do you think then?
I think there are two or three really key points that you need to consider. One is you need to be really confident of the market that you're working in, that you understand it, that you are an expert in it, that you have the network in it, and that you are able to deliver on what you are selling. I think the other thing as well is training internally. It's all very well wanting to sell a retained model, but understanding how a retained model works, what the expectations are, and then expecting your consultants to be able to go out there and sell the retainers. A lot of the businesses that I have worked with that are moving into that transition, a lot of the consultants have never sold retained partnerships before. So it's most of it is confidence. If you're working for the right business, it's just confidence. And that's certainly the case with some of the businesses that I've worked with. But there are businesses that I have not worked with that I have seen that they've been thrown into a retained model, but they don't actually know that they don't know how to sell them, they don't know how to manage it, and they don't know whether they're going to be able to deliver on them either. So I think having a really confident market understanding, and also the ability to back it up both internally and externally, and give your staff the support to be able to deliver on those retainers, I think is absolutely key. Absolutely key.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what you're saying about confidence, and because the firms that I've seen that are wanting to do more retained work are typically ones that are doing some retained work, but it tends to be just the CEO or the maybe one person that's doing that most of the retained work, and the rest is contingency, and they don't a lot of those firms don't make that transition because back to the people question, there maybe they're people that are just in that contingency mindset. But do you think it's possible to develop people from that from that existing mindset to I know it's a big question, but to that kind of retained mindset?
It's a massive question. If you're changing your business model from how you've operated and how your business is set up, to deliver something slightly different, then you have to have the support internally and externally to back that up. And it's one thing being able to win retainers. It's another thing then being able to deliver on them, but also then have, a team behind you that also have the confidence to win retainers, not just because they know how to win them, but because they have the confidence that they're going to be going to be delivered on. But there's a little bit of a hinge to that as well. It's very difficult to then step away from that low-lying fruit. If you've got a candidate that you know that you're going to be able to place, that if you called up an old client that said, I'm not going to retain you, but if you delivered that candidate, you introduce that candidate to them, they'll probably get a job. So you have to be you have to be committed, is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and brave enough to walk away from clients that perhaps aren't ready to retain you. Or you need to be able to step up your game and say, look, if you really want to work with us, then you're going to have to retain us. So that it's moving from that sort of contingent model to retain model is very difficult. Moving from a hybrid model, which is still growing and developing and hiring, that it's not quite so difficult. But either way, the transition in this industry has been incredible over the last 24 months, and there are a lot of businesses that are moving into this model, and some are doing it really well and some not so. And my biggest advice would be is don't do it unless you're really confident on what you can deliver on.
Interesting and committed, probably. And I think what you were saying about refusing to do contingency work, to at least some level links nicely into perception and brand, which obviously Gray is heading up for us. And what I was going to ask you, Gray, is I mean, again, a very broad question, but what do you consider that's important from a branding and positioning point of view for a firm that's making that transition?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it's a tough question to answer because it requires, I think, a little bit of kind of self-analysis, if you will, if you think of the organization in totality. So it's really a matter, I think, because the messaging is very different. I think, as Alex was saying, there's a transition involved there in terms of economics. I mean, the economics is different in contingency than it is in retained as well. So there's a whole mindset difference that goes along, in my experience. And some people can make the transition, from a contingent brain to a retained brain, from a transactional brain to a consultative brain, right? So it's similar, I think, too, from a brand perspective, right? Because you're really kind of changing the foundation of the organization. So organizations that we've worked with, Tim, and that I've worked with in the past, it's a matter of looking at, okay, so what is the equity that we have in the kind of brand or the envelope, if you will, that we have currently? Is that equity transferable, right? It's kind of, I always tell clients, no matter what type of brand consulting I've done over the years, it's kind of like you invite a carpenter into your house to do, some changes in your house. You say, oh, can I do this? And the carpenter looks at you and says, you got enough money, I can do anything you want, right? It's the same thing in branding. I mean, I can make anything, if you've got enough money, mean whatever you want it to mean in the marketplace. But the challenge is trying to figure out the efficient way to do it and the correct way to do it, right? And so understanding, I think, what the equity that you have inherent in the current brand that you have, and can that transfer? And if that can't, can we evolve it in a way to make it work? I always talk about evolution in branding and not revolution, right? One firm that I worked with made a very simple transition to, from a brand perspective of going from, say, Alpha Associates to basically a naming structure of the two lead partners in the organization. And that provided them a platform to communicate with the marketplace of the transition that they were making and the strategic change they were making in the organization. And it's interesting, and to Alex's point, they still struggle with that low hanging fruit. Oh my gosh, we need to pay the bills, right? So will do that, you know. And I've argued with them a lot about that, because what they're doing by doing so is kind of dragging that new brand they're trying to seed in the marketplace. They're kind of diluting that and dragging it
Diluting
down
it,
in the
yeah.
market. Yeah. And that's a huge challenge. So it's really, there's a little bit of kind of self-analysis that goes along, and, you know, what can we do, you know. And it's not just about the brand, because it's not about the logo or the name or any of that either. It's about the story that you're telling to the marketplace, and how do you evolve that story. You know, Tim and I talk a lot about message strategies, you know, talking points, that type of thing. The things that you have in your back pocket, the elevator speech, a lot of people say, that you talk about your firm. So that evolution is critical.
And yeah, really interesting, great. And what I think we've all seen is in the recruitment industry, contingency, hybrid, and retained, you know, people have long memories, don't they? And you know, it's hard. I guess this is true of any sector. It's very hard to dispel the past, isn't it, or to cancel out the past. So how do you best manage that in terms of, you know, because I know quite a few pure retained search firms who were founded as contingency firms or hybrids, who are still thought of, or by, you know, by a lot of people. I'm sure Alex knows some too. They're still thought of, you know, with kind of a slightly mixed perception.
That would be a situation where I would recommend they do something semi-revolutionary, at least. Change their name, modify their name, evolve their name. Give yourself an opportunity to make noise, whether it's through a PR or a media outreach or social engagement, right? But it's all about consistency. So the first step in that situation, if you're struggling with, yeah, you know, we've made the change, but people still look at us as this, as our past, right? Then you may need to do something radical, you know, something provocative to change that mindset, right? But it's also about continuous, constant, consistent communication as well.
No, thank you. That's really, really interesting. And coming to you, Elliot. So see, you know, we're working with you and helping you with your strategy, but more specifically helping you hire some people who want to make that journey towards being towards being fully retained. And you've been on that journey with a lot of focus towards becoming 100% retained. But what would be your kind of 3 top tips, if you would, in terms of how to make that journey?
Yeah, probably lots of top tips and lots of learnings over the years, to be fair. Taking it back a step, we launched our business with more of a focus around trying to be a bit different. So myself and my 3 business partners worked together in a past life, and we set up 6.5 years ago. We wanted to create something which was a bit different, and for us that was having a grown-up culture, attracting experienced recruiters. But back then it was around a flexible working environment, which in the world of recruitment was really kind of quite different, based on all the head offices and all the corporate overheads, I suppose, of those offices in 20-year leases, etc. So that was one of our key USPs, and ultimately, as we've kind of grown and developed, that has become less of a USP, as everyone else obviously has either chosen but more probably forced to do it in the last few years. So from our point of view, we have gone through that kind of journey of finding out quite who we are and what we want to be, and that is probably an evolution for us, kind of over kind of a number of years. Being also kind of a perm-based business, I don't think we were alone in probably confidently forecasting revenue more than a few months in advance. We didn't have an interim kind of temporary aspect of our business. So as much as we might naturally gain exclusivity, does that actually mean sole agency? Does it mean exclusivity or competing against your internal talent teams, for example? So from a point of view of where we got then to becoming kind of focused a bit more on the retained side, we were hybrid. So your initial intro saying where we were coming from, absolutely correct. It was a very low percentage, probably 10-20% of our work was retained. and we've gone through that journey. But we ultimately had a bit of a realization at a board meeting where we did quite a deep dive on kind of where we were operating at and what we were focused on. And it was a real realization around the contingent work we were kind of transacting. And it just kind of breaks your heart when you realize across the business all the time and effort and energy which goes into contingent recruitment, where actually quite often you don't get the fee at the end because you might have been a multiple kind of agent or against internal talent teams, or the role gets put on hold, but you've got no cancellation fee and other things kind of happening. So from our point of view, we committed to investing in that kind of retained model and going on that journey a few years ago now. For us, lots of lessons learned. I just want to kind of set the scene there just so that I can maybe explain that kind of EHG kind of journey as such. From a point of view of like tips, I suppose, it goes back to I think what both Gray and Alex have said in regards to that investment, and that's investment of time and actually of money when it comes to looking at the kind of retained aspects of our offering. So for us, it is understanding there is going to be an investment and actually being quite brave around that investment, both in time and money. Before getting to that point, obviously a step back, communicating between yes, founders, but the wider business, making sure everyone either is or can be on the same wavelength when it comes to that progression and where we're heading to. And once you start looking at kind of that background of where people have been transacting and kind of that contingent work, when we have had exclusive or retained work, it's quite obvious in lots of ways, right? Everyone would love to be 100% retained. And again, like Alex and Greg both said, it is hard to sometimes reinvent yourself. So it is on that side which we did invest. So tips, I suppose, is that investment around our website. So we're actually relaunching that in a few weeks. It's taken the last 12 months. That will be around our positioning and content and kind of those side of things for us. So on that basis as well, it's CRM systems. So we were working with Bullhorn. It's very contingent. So it's really kind of looking out to the market. What technology is there to enable you as a search firm to actually transact and work the mandates efficiently and correctly? So we found a Salesforce platform called 720, which works for us. And being Salesforce, it's a lot more user-friendly and can help us do all the aspects which we feel we need from the operational, I suppose, piece of search. But then linking them to search is that mindset. So again, we've kind of discussed that kind of already across kind of Gray and Alex. But that mindset is really hard to change once you're actually turning away business, maybe from clients you've known for years, actually decades for some of us. Everyone for us in our environment has between 15, 20 and plus years experience in recruitment and in search. But turning away business is tough. So it's that education both with the client and internally when it comes to talking around maybe what we can do now and what we are focused on going forwards, and having some, I suppose, areas where you can turn down business and walk away, whether it be salary level, whether it be fee percentage. Usually for us, it is around actually getting the terms of business signed and getting that financial commitment up front. If you're not getting me upfront financial commitment, the client probably isn't as committed to the search in the first place, and therefore you can't prioritize, I suppose, a search over something else as well. So in terms of business, again, it's an obvious one, but getting kind of all of that sorted as well. Most key though, again, we have covered it already, is that investment in training. For us, it really kind of did make sense to go out to the market and see what training was available. As much as between all of us, we had done search, we've been taught internally from past businesses or learnt ourselves kind of in a roundabout way. Actually, to be, I suppose, that outwardly facing search business who can deliver and have the respect of that external market, we felt we needed training. And I feel
Mm.
training is something sometimes salespeople thrive on. Some people dislike it. Some sales people, recruiters, headhunters, think they know best. They've always done it in a certain way. They're kind of not always thinking they want to learn something new. But I feel that investment in training, once we found the right partner, has been really useful for the last kind of year or two, basically. And it has enabled us to open our minds up in regards to just how we approach the world of search and make it very consistent across our brand as well. So we are talking hopefully the same language. So going back to Gray's point around that kind of brand perception and how we're seen as a business. And through that also then looking at your collateral as well, making sure you've got the correct kind of pitch documentation, which you can use to back up what you're saying, case studies and all of that, I suppose, side of things from a marketing point of view. So before you know it, there's a lot of time, money, effort spent on that transitionary phase. And I feel, if anything, lesson learned on that was we felt it may have happened a bit quicker. And maybe if we'd had that conversation a year or two earlier, we'd be more advanced than we are. So we're hovering around that kind of 50-60% retained kind of revenues at the moment. So we do still have some key clients who will work with us on a exclusive contingent basis. We do have terms of business, so it is separated to talent teams. So all kind of candidates would come through those terms of business, and there is a methodology around that, and that does work for us with some clients. New people we're hiring. We very naive. We felt we could potentially just hire experienced search consultants who would want to come and join us because we're paying decent salaries, good commission structures. We're nice people, or we believe we are, and we've got some good values, and we hopefully present ourselves in a good way. But without actually having all the infrastructure and everything else in place, that was a very obvious lesson to learn, that actually you need to have good business in the right place to then hopefully attract the right talent. So for us, committing kind of that money through systems, processes, training, we hope to be able to, and we are attracting people who want to go on that journey with us. We're definitely not perfect. We're not the final kind of article. We're still learning, and we actually enjoy learning. We want to always be challenging ourselves and moving to that next kind of stage of our evolution. But people to join us who hopefully buy into that journey and want to get the benefit of what we've learned, go on that journey with us, get the benefit of formal training programs through our external partners. So on that basis, yeah, appreciate I've gone off on a few different kind of angles there, but there's so much to
really interesting points. I've been writing notes as you've been writing. There's as you've been talking, there's a couple of things that I'd really love to pick up on. First of all, I think when we talk about moving into a retained market, it's because we want to get away from that contingency. You do all the work and then you don't get paid for it at the end, and that's of course it's a good reason to go into it, but it should never be. I'm not using you as an example, Elliot, but it was just a point that you brought up. But actually you already started as a hybrid. When you set up, you started as a hybrid. You had experienced consultants and you're already doing some retained work. So this perhaps doesn't apply to you, but with businesses that are going from a strictly contingent model wanting to go to retained, it's because I'm sick of doing all this work and then not getting paid for it, and that's not good enough reason to do it. You have to have the backup. And also the profile that you're trying to extend to people to come and work for you is probably the same profile that you're trying to extend to clients, and say to them, why would you retain us, in the same way as why would you come and be a search consultant for us?
Right.
It's that same, there has to be that commitment of, we are really good at what we do, we can deliver. Why would you want to work with anybody else? And working with us would be better than working with 4 contingency businesses, and working for us would be, or coming to work for us as a consultant you know, where we're still on this learning curve. I'm very fortunate that I've got clients that are growing with me. So, and clients that are moving through that. So we're all learning, we're all on this journey. But if you're going to go in there full on and say, I am a retained model and, you know, I want executive search consultants and I want retained clients, there's an element of humility that is required in recruitment these days, I think, that is different to when you set up, in particular, Elliot, you know, when working from home, flexible working, you know, unlimited holidays, bean bags in the office, all those things, they were all like lovely things to have. But that's not reality anymore. You know, you have, what's reality now is quality, and it's winning quality business, being able to deliver on quality business, and that will bring you your consultants as well, because you'll build up that reputation. And I know Gray talks about doing something quite drastic in terms of your branding, and branding is really important, of course it is, but it's more about drastic in your attitude. It's more about being really committed to, this is what we are going to do, and I know experienced recruiters don't want to change how they do things, and they want to grab the low-lying fruit, and you know, they want to some are reluctant to be trained, but if they're on board with you, they'll be on board with you, and it's helping them change their mindset as well.
When I was at Boyden, we had some transition in terms of adding some ancillary, what I called closely aligned ancillary services to the core competency of executive search. And it was interesting, actually. We implemented a very significant kind of professional development program within the firm. And it was funny because a lot of the very, very successful search partners within the firm were kind of like, yeah, no, I don't need that, right? I don't need that. But then they would take part in it, and they're like, wow, you know, hey, I can still learn, right? And I can still evolve, and I can still advance my career further and even be more successful. And sometimes, you know, I've seen that because I've consulted a lot in professional services and partnership focused organizations, right? There's that you said the word humble, I think, a little while ago. There's a bit of kind of, you know, that humbleness needs to start being more active than it has been in the past. I think simply because, one, of what's happened in the last 24 months, but also what client demand is as well, and what the client expectations are requiring that. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, we don't need to dress up Christmas tree. Just be real. Be real. This is what I do. This is my network. I will deliver. I am committed. You know, it's not rocket science.
Totally agree. It's the classic people by people, and you're not going to necessarily please everyone as well. But if you are hopefully being yourself, showing your true colours, being human, I think lots of us are in recruitment because we actually just love what we do. We kind of maybe don't always see it on that sales commercial side. We actually just love the end result of delivering a process and finding that person who's ideal for the role and adds real value to the client as well. So that kind of humility and kind of aspect of being human in the last couple of years definitely has kind of shone through. And
certainly the businesses that I've seen have the biggest that have had the biggest transition from that sort of search and selection to a fully retained model have come, they're the ones that have invested the most in their people and being real and being committed and being experts in their market, and having that sort of integrity and humility that the industry should demand all the time, not just in the last 2 years. And you know, but really, you know, it's really important more now than ever that, you know, you can't just say, I want to move to a retained model because you know, we can't keep losing these contingency fees, or because we want to get this, you know, this revenue in immediately, so therefore we're only going to sell retained, or you're going to be pushed towards retained. There has to be, you know, there's got to be a story behind it.
But that's the difference though, right, between contingency. I mean, I come out of my experiences really in the retained model, but that's the difference between the contingent and the retained model, right? The contingent model is transactional. It's, you know, get a body in a seat, that type of thing. And that's the mindset change that has to happen, that consultative approach and the process and the hand holding, the knowledge transfer and all of that stuff that happens in that consultative model. That's a huge change for people to make, no?
I would very slightly challenge you there, Gray, in as much as that there are lots of contingency businesses that are
Yeah, of course.
consultative, and they do manage processes really well, and they still have that consultative feel about it. I think
Right.
my point is that you can't go into a retained model unless you're fully committed to delivering on those retainers and backing up the people
Sure.
that are going to be delivering on it. And
Yeah.
there is definitely, unless you've been working with a client for 10 or 20 years or something, if you are working in a retained partnership with a client, it is a different relationship. It is more of a partnership, and there is definitely a more human element that comes to it. And with that, I think comes a bit of trust with your staff in terms of how they can manage those clients and how they can manage that. Yeah, I definitely agree that there is a level of partnership that comes in retained work. But although I do think there are some contingency business, I think there will always be a place for contingency, but it's you know, it's not how I would want to work anymore.
Yeah.
Great.
There's a place for everyone, I think, ultimately.
Of course.
It's down to the quality of that end result, and people by people. So people want to work with different people, and it's knowing when to walk away from business as well. But actually, you can't win all your battles when it comes to pitching and working with certain, sectors, certain levels, certain areas. And it's been really kind of eye-opening around some clients being maybe more easily converted to a retained model, because they just completely get it once you're laying down your cards and talking through actually what happens behind the scenes, and having that kind of honest approach to the conversation. It's been really refreshing on that basis. So talking on the partner basis of them maybe then pipelining future business, so you can actually have those sensible conversations months and months ahead, versus it be a knee-jerk, crikey, internal recruitment haven't got us what we need, someone's leaving, we need to find someone quickly, great, let's put it out to 10 people, and we'll go and find the best people through kind of go to 10 people. It doesn't happen, right? Because everyone then doesn't prioritize it. So,
and when you're talking with a client on that level of partnership, then there are so many other avenues that can open up from that. So you might be talking to a client about a senior leadership role on a retained basis. You fill that role, and then from that there'll be other things that open up: advisory services, services about relocation into different countries or territories, parachuting somebody in to help them grow their team under the leader that you've hired. There is so much more that can be opened up to you. You're not just a recruitment consultant anymore. So it's a really consultative model to go down. It's a really exciting model to go down.
Fascinating. I think what you all said about, touched on this last 24 months and COVID, and humility has been as the word that's kind of come up quite a lot, I think is really pertinent. I think, senior people probably in all industries, but certainly in the recruitment industry, I think we're guilty as leaders, and I count myself amongst these, who don't look after ourselves in terms of professional development and training. And I think people are looking at themselves more now, aren't they? Which is good. And I think, Elliot's point was very strong, is that he had to, or he and his 3 co-owners had to, take some serious steps to make that transition. Otherwise, it wasn't going to happen. And that's also in professional development and training.
Brave thing to do, yeah.
Yeah. So Rachel Ferguson in the chat has asked specifically about who we recommend for training, and Elliot and I have come across the same person, who's called Lou Archer, who I was incredibly impressed with, who specializes in training. That's all she does, I think, training people.
Works for a business called Retrained for
Retrained. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
we actually went out to the market quite widely to try and find someone who could partner and offer that expertise. But there aren't many people out there doing exactly what they do. There are trainers when it comes to recruitment and sales, and elements of that include search. But yeah, I expect lots of commission from Lou for recommending her. But,
yeah, Louise is fabulous. She works with a
excellent.
couple of my clients, although I've got a couple of other contacts as well. I think it depends on the size of business and the market you work in, and maybe your location as well. So really happy to recommend some people. But Louise is brilliant. I mean, and Louise, she's been doing it for, well, longer than most of us. So, in terms of understanding the retain model and how to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks, Rachel, for that great question. And I think, we've got
Great
other
question.
contacts as well. So just contact us, depending on exactly what you want. But Lou Archer does come highly recommended from all of us. And Rachel's other question was not related, but I don't know if anyone is comfortable answering this. If they're not, I'll give it my best shot. I'm not a very good sort of at the technical side of databases, but what is the difference between a search database and another type of database for recruitment? I don't know if you're able to answer that, Alex, or
No, but I have a couple of clients that can. So I'd be happy to put you in contact with people that'll be able to advise you that. I'm on a member of a couple of WhatsApp groups, and they often talk about databases, search databases, and they're all hybrids or search businesses. And the list is pretty extensive, but I'll be able to put you in touch with people that have got good experience of working with some of these databases.
Yeah,
not myself personally, but
the difference is too, it comes down to customization, right? I mean, now that you said you were implementing Salesforce, yeah?
That's correct. Yeah.
And there, I would imagine there's a fair amount of customization within your environment, but Salesforce is very, it's an open platform that's good for that.
And that's what we found, I suppose, in short. To go back to Rachel's question on that, we were using a cloud-based system. So we're using Bullhorn. I'm happy to say that it was Bullhorn we were using, and it did serve a purpose. There's nothing against Bullhorn and kind of what they offer. It's a great product and works really well for lots of people. For us transitioning to search, there were just too many barriers for us around that customization to give us what we needed. So from the search, I suppose, database aspect, it's not necessarily that it's about a database, it's more about the methodology of search and getting the CRM system to align with that. So you can ultimately present things to clients, you can manipulate data and reports and that side of things. Also from an internal perspective, enables you to pipeline your mandates and things coming through, we found, more effectively as well. So it depends what you want, I suppose, from your search database or CRM database. But ultimately, customization, like you said, Gray, it is really key, because it needs to suit you versus you suit what you're buying, and try and awkwardly change how you work certain processes because you have to fit them alongside a database which isn't quite fit for purpose. So and Alex, you're right, there's loads of them out there.
I'm just having a look through now some of the ones that are recommended. If anybody wants some recommendations, let me know. I mean, there's loads of them out there, and there's a 10-day conversation that goes on the group chat about which ones are the best.
We went through a 2-year evaluation exercise at Boyden when we were transitioning and looked at, I don't know, 20 different platforms at least. And it depends if you need an enterprise solution or a one office, single seat, 10-seat solution. It's different. It depends on what your needs are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think with Katie, who's my sort of right-hand woman, is kind of currently looking at other CRM systems that sort of focus on the executive search And yeah, if anyone wants to any recommendations, just contact us and yeah, tell us
Yeah,
exactly.
I think a lot of it depends on the sector that you work on as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, and just going back to the training point, Elliot, because I think that's really interesting. I mean, and I guess it depends on the person as well, but what do you think most people need if they've not been doing much retained work? What do they, I mean, Alex mentioned confidence, which is a great word before, but what else do they need to be able to win and deliver? Because I think that side's probably forgotten sometimes, more retained work.
Yeah, there's two things there. There's several angles to all of it, absolutely. I think it's a ground up kind of process from a training point of view, and there's definitely nothing wrong about going back to basics when it comes to kind of training. So on that basis, an open mind to just listen and maybe go through some sessions initially and thinking you might know better, or you're not quite sure on what you're kind of being taught. I'm saying training in general as opposed to specific kind of search to search training. On that basis, it's also having some angle of adapting back to different personalities and different levels of experience as well. So if you can work with partners who can offer some flexibility, that's great. I think for us as a business, it is leading from the front as well, and that element of being human, humility, the fact that all of us as a business go on it together or have done kind of sessions and modules together. I don't mind making a fool of myself and putting myself into different kind of role play scenarios and stuff, just to kind of set the kind of scene. Sometimes it's maybe very awkward, silly little moments where we have been locked away in our four walls in our homes, kind of a bit too flexibly away from the office, but it is a bit strange going back even on video, let alone in the office, to do training. So it can feel a bit artificial, I suppose, on that basis. So it's opening your kind of mind up to being able to go through a new kind of training process, especially after you've maybe been in the industry for 10, 15 plus years experience. So we have spoken to various people through hiring processes, and it doesn't necessarily mean either side of the scale, but sometimes if you haven't had training, you might just throw yourself into it a bit more, whereas you maybe have had bad training in the past on the kind of senior side, if you've been in the industry for a while. I've had some great coaching, I've had some less great coaching over the years. Again, that's a different angle. That coaching is quite personal as well. So it does all link into that retained side, though, because training needs to work for the business and the personalities behind it. And that's my 2 pennies worth. So there you go.
Training's so important. It really is. I think it's something that's been really broadsheeted in our industry over the last few years. It's like, oh, we do great training, but it's like training across the board. And actually, I think one thing that we have learned over the last 24, 36 months is that everybody is individual. Everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own needs and their own confidences. And, training should be bespoke. And I don't mean that one-on-one, but if you're going into a training session and you're coming out of it and you've not learned anything, then there's something wrong with the trainer, not necessarily you, if you've gone into the training session in the first place. There's one thing about being reticent about thinking that thinking you know everything, or you don't need to learn, or you don't need to train. I don't think there's anybody that is going to be or will continue to be hugely successful in this industry that is not willing to accept that every day is a learning day. You're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with people's livelihoods, we're talking about people's businesses, and then you've got yourself as well. So every day is a learning day, and if anybody's not open to training, and that might be something like training, this is how our business is going to position ourselves in the future, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the model we're going to have, and in the meantime, maybe you might need a little bit of help here, or should we work on this area? If somebody is not open to that, then that's probably going to be somebody that may not be able to deliver the kind of quality of retained services to your clients on a continuous basis. There's no space for arrogance anymore.
You said something really interesting there to me, which I think gets missed a lot, is there's two components to training, right? There's training about the you and where
business.
you fit in the
And
organization.
yeah.
And then there's where you are, right? You
Yeah.
know, and modular systems in training can be very helpful to achieve that and actually kind of do that kind of tailored bespoke approach. So I think it's a really
Definitely.
key
And
point.
look, high performers, really strong performers, they're not going to be the first ones and say, I
Yeah.
need some help here, like, you know, or I don't feel confident about doing this. They're not going to be those people. They're the ones that put the shutter down. I can do this. I'm all right. I'm good. I'm good. I'm look at my billing figures. Look, I'm all right.
Yeah.
I
You
don't
might
need to
surprise
learn
them, though.
anymore.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah.
we all need to learn every single day, and you know, it's going back to that humility thing again, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
tapping into your workforce and understanding what they need, both as individuals but also as a business. I think the biggest thing, if you're moving from a contingency model or a hybrid model into a search business, you have to have that message. This is what we are doing. This is how we do our work. This is what we are going to do for you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, and this is how we're going to do it. And you work together as a team, and how you get there, each individual there is you as a business owner or a business leader, is up to you. But as far as the client is concerned, and as far as the external perspective is concerned, this is what we do.
Yeah. From a
Good.
brand
Yeah.
strategy perspective, we would call that you have to be clear, credible, and relevant in the market. So
And confidence, when I talked about confidence
confidence is a
before,
good
it
one
was
to have,
it wasn't about somebody having the balls to say to a client, I want to sell you a retained model.
yeah.
It's about having the confidence in their ability, in their team, in their business, in their sector, in their understanding, all of it. That's where confidence comes from. It comes from knowledge and support. And you know, otherwise we're all going to get wrapped up in this, in the same race that we've been chasing in contingency for like 20 years previously. We're all going to be sat round a table, all pitching for the same retainers and not having that differential. And that's, you know, everybody should be able to be an individual, but overall as a business, you work as a team, and we are experts in this. This is why you, the client, want to work with us, and why you would retain us, and be really confident in that message.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And I've been messaged by my Marcoms team to say that we should actually keep it to the hour, because I'm sure everyone's very busy. I think this has been, you know, I think we could all talk for a few hours. Whether we have any audience left, I don't know. But it's hopefully an interesting subject for us, but also for other people too. And this is our first webinar on this subject, and you know, really welcome feedback. You know, constructive criticism or otherwise, but also suggestions on what else you'd like to talk to us about, on this subject or any other subjects. Really happy to answer any queries or any questions that you think of, and I know I can speak for all of the panelists to say that they'd be happy to as well. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. We've just put our website address up on the chat, and I think you've all got our details anyway. So please come back to us, and you know, thank you for attending, and thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to Elliot, thank you to Gray, and thanks to Alex so much, and look forward to the next one.
Okay,
My
see you all
pleasure. Thank you,
soon.
guys.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for attending. Bye.